It's time to due diligence. Here's your host, Wiley Deason.
Welcome back to Season 2 of the Due Diligence Podcast. I am really excited for this season. I'm excited about the topic. It is my favorite topic to discuss with other people. And I'm really excited to be joined by my wife, Mallory, as we talk about the diligent home together. And so this season, Mallory and I will be discussing how you can be intentional and purposeful in your home, how you can be zealous and proactive. No matter how busy you are as a husband or wife, father or mother, life inside of your home will be a lot more meaningful and beneficial and rewarding if you are diligent in the decisions that you make. In all reality, and I really don't feel like I have to say this, but life is short. In the grand scheme of things, we don't get a lot of time. And as busy people, we are often pulled in so many different directions. It's as if there is a thief in every home in this world. And this thief constantly follows you around throughout your day. And this thief is not a porch pirate stealing your Amazon packages as soon as they are delivered. This thief is more of an invisible thief. Your Ring cameras cannot catch them. And for our purposes, we want to call this thief the time thief. This thief robs us of our time. This thief surprises us, catches us off guard, distracts us, and tries to get us to focus on anything but what is the most important thing. And this time thief is a real problem in our lives. This time thief is a real problem in our homes. And so how can we steal our time away? How can we reclaim our time from this time thief? Well, I know that we have talked about this a lot as we've talked about our own home, and you've warned me about it a lot in our lives together, but why do you think time goes by so quickly?
I'm not really sure. I've thought about a lot of reasons. I've thought about, is it because we're just getting older and with age comes this feeling of the times passing by faster? Is it because now that we are older, we have more responsibilities, more things filling up the plate, and that makes it then seem as if we don't have enough time or that the time is passing by fast? I even today, when I was thinking about it, thought, okay, are we just having too much fun? Are we having too much fun in our day-to-day life? Because it says, the phrase is, time flies when you're having fun. So maybe it's just that we're having too much fun. And it's just passing quickly.
We are having a lot of fun.
True.
In the grand scheme of things, we don't get a lot of time. The busier you are, the faster time flies. Mm-hmm. I also think that time is very deceiving. In some ways, it seems like it was just yesterday that we were married. We were living in our first apartment in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and we were going through job changes and moves and all of these things as we were starting out as a married couple. But in other ways, it seems like, while it seems like it was yesterday before, it seems like it was so long ago. That
right.
There has been so much that's happened
right.
in between that time and now. And that same thing can be said about our kids. It seems like yesterday that Liam was born, but that was over a decade ago.
Oh, I know. I was thinking about how his birthday is this week and that he's going to be 11. Mm-hmm. And he was sitting, I guess we were on the couch together last night. I don't know. It was over the weekend. And I literally sat there and looked at him. I mean, he has no clue. But I looked at him and thought, I've known you for 11 years. How's that even possible? Am I old enough to even know a kid like you for 11 years? I mean, it's been great, but
it's insane.
I mean, it's
Absolutely.
Crazy to think how fast it's gone.
Yeah, and for our listeners, I would just say that I get a lot of these memories every day
Mm-hmm.
in pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day I'm reminded of what we saw 10, 11 years ago.
Right.
I'm reminded of how Liam came into the world. I am reminded of everything. But then it also seems that while it seems like yesterday, that it was so long ago. that so much has happened, so much has taken place. It's true. If you blink, you will miss something because life is so short. But as time goes by, it's almost as if we get more and more distracted too. Here's what I mean by that. We get into the natural flow and routine of our lives together. And so there are times when we are on cruise control. There are times when we are on autopilot and we are not really paying attention to what happens around us. Have you ever found yourself like that?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think of some of our busiest weeks that we have, you know, it can almost just feel as if you're just trying to make it through this enormous checklist of all the things you have to do. And then, you know, it's almost as if the checklist does not have the part that says, oh, let's check in with each other and let's communicate, or let's sit down and have a genuine conversation with the kids, or whatever you feel like it is that you're missing out on. I definitely feel that way.
Yeah, and I think that leads us into kind of the next thing you and I decided to talk about here, because I think a lot of times when we miss those things, we get distracted. And I think there are a lot of things that distract us. And so let's think about this. I think that for most people, this idea of this invisible time thief is easy to identify with, but sometimes it's hard to identify. It's hard to define. And I think for our listeners and for those who are watching, I think what they might want to hear is something that defines what this time thief looks like, what this time thief is. I think some things are obvious. I mean, I think some things are not as obvious.
I would agree. As you're talking about it, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, if you were to ask me or even yourself or anybody that might be listening, list out the distractions. How many things are we actually going to put on the list as a distraction? Now, obviously, right? I mean, a phone comes to your mind, but beyond things like that, what are we actually going to call an actual distraction?
Yeah.
Because some of these things that are distractions are good things, but would we call it a distraction or not?
Yeah.
How do we determine it?
You know, when I think of distractions, I think of things like, you know, it's the obvious things. It's the phone and scrolling through your phone. I think about social media and especially today because, you know, we've done this at the end of our day that we've got all these reels and a lot of them are hilarious. And so we share them with each other. We identify with them. And so those just kind of just suck us in to the social media, to the reels, the YouTube videos, the streaming services. You know, we binge watch Netflix or our favorite TV shows on YouTube television or something like that. And we have all of those things. And if we're not careful, life becomes more about making sure we get to catch the next episode before we go to bed than it does actually having a meaningful conversation. And sometimes it even becomes, and I've noticed this about myself, that it becomes more about, okay, we got to get the kids to bed so we can watch our show than, okay, let's have a meaningful time to say goodnight to our kids. And let's slow down. And yeah, if they want that extra hug, let's go give them that extra hug, that extra kiss. Let's say goodnight. And
It cuts to the core.
It does. When I think about it, it absolutely drives me crazy. About myself. And so obviously I think you probably feel the same thing. I think that's something that our listeners and those watching can identify with, or it could be things that start out very innocently. You know, your phone rings and, oh, that's really important. I have got to answer that call. Have you ever met somebody that they've had to answer every single phone call that they get? They could be on another phone call that they've just picked up and they could say, oh, but hold on, this one is so important. I think you and I both have somebody in mind right now.
We
But
won't go there.
We won't go
yes.
there. Yeah, absolutely. But there's text messages. Oh, I have to respond to that. Or even the other things that are there, emails and other messaging apps and things like that. But have you ever met someone who always has to be just glued to those things? And do you ever see them, like, especially those with kids, and even those who are without kids who are married, they're so glued to these things that they don't even know what's going on around them. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to deal with today as parents, as a husband or wife. I think we have to deal with those distractions that are so obvious, but yet they aren't obvious because we don't realize how we're getting sucked into those things.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing that comes to mind are the things on our schedule, on our calendars.
Right.
And I think this is probably the thing that is the least obvious to people.
Right.
Because we don't think about our schedules and the things that we're doing as a family as distractions.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm talking about are like the ball schedules, and you know where I'm going with this, the band competitions, the chorus concerts, the school plays, all of these things that we think, okay, our kids need to do this in order to be good citizens, in order to learn social skills, in order to just succeed. Yeah, be well-rounded and succeed at life.
Right.
And so we think about these things and we think our kids have to do this. And so then what happens, and I've preached on this, I've talked about this from the pulpit, you know, we get the kids out of school, we get off of work, and then 1 minute we're trying to scarf down McDonald's, and then we're trying to go from the band practice to the soccer practice to the baseball practice back to home to get homework done and to get baths and get ready for bed. And then we start the next day all over again. And before long, we're just absolutely exhausted, and we've had no meaningful time with each other as a couple or with our kids because we've been so involved in helping them be, well, as you put it, more well-rounded.
I know that that's a hard thing for us to realize a lot of times because you're filling up this week and then you get to the weekend and it's probably full still. Right? Or even if it's not, then we're just kind of collapsing on the weekend because we just survived another week, or however you want to put it.
Yeah, and I just thought of this as you said, we're collapsing. A lot of times too, you know, you want to have that time with people you're close to outside of your family. Mm-hmm. And so we feel like we've got to have a guy's night, or we've got to have the girls' night, mm-hmm. or we can't say no to something because we didn't say no to this distraction. And so we've got to do this as well when we should be saying no to something, right? But then mm-hmm. those things that are good things in and of themselves, but they become almost distractions too, in a sense, because we're constantly on the go. And I think that's a big struggle that we face sometimes.
Yeah, I would say so.
What are some things that we should consider as we are making time for our family? When I say that, you know, what comes to your mind? And this is what I'm thinking. Okay, so there's a Bible verse that talks about time, and it doesn't have the word diligence in it. It doesn't have, it doesn't really talk about family, but it's just talking about life in general. And it's in Ephesians 5 and verse 16. And Paul says there, be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time because the days are evil. And that phrase, making the most of our time, or of your time, it also means to redeem the time, to reclaim the time. In other words, to take your time back. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to be wise, it starts with time. And if we're going to make the most of our time, if we're going to take it back, if we're going to literally almost steal it back from this time thief, we have got to prioritize, and we've got to be diligent in our efforts to do that. And so when I think about this question, what are we considering as we are making time for our family? I think about that Bible verse. I also think about science. And I know that sounds like a weird place to go, but I think about the fact that science has proven that when the family unit is in place, the individuals that make up the family do better in life. Mm-hmm. And so statistics show that children with actively engaged fathers and mothers, and you see this in school every day because you're a teacher, they do better in school. They get higher grades, they have better social skills, they are stronger emotionally, they have less depression and anxiety, and they don't have near as many behavioral problems as children whose parents are not as engaged, or who only have one parent who is engaged. And so we need to understand that what Paul said in Ephesians 5 about time and applying that to diligence in the home is really important. But then I want you to think about this too. It's not just about parenting. It's also about really how the home starts. It starts with a husband and a wife, and couples who spend more quality time together are 14 to 15% happier in their marriage. You know that I love statistics, okay? So
You know that I love quality time.
Absolutely.
Let's go.
So this is like a great thing to do together, right? So studies also show that if you have a regularly scheduled date night, quality time, you'll like this.
Okay.
That you will have a lower likelihood of divorce. You'll have a happier marriage. And so quality time is very, very, very important. And so when we think about all of these things, what else comes to your mind as we think about the things that we need to consider?
I think first and foremost, you have to look at it and think, what, if we're sitting here and we're saying that we don't have time, okay, then you have to look at it and say, what do I want more time for?
Okay.
That's where my head goes. Because yes, you're absolutely right. If we're going to reclaim our time, if we're going to have more time and all these things, yes, we absolutely have to prioritize. I feel like that's almost a given, right? That we know that. So instead, I feel like you have to look at it and say, but wait, why do I want more time in the first place? Right? I mean, you referenced like a guy's night or a girl's night. Do I want more time because I just want more time for myself, right? I just want to sit by myself, read a book, or I want to have time for myself to do this hobby, whether it's golf or whether it's hunting. I hate to use both of those because they're very male dominated, but females have, hobbies and things that they can talk about too. But again, why do you want that time anyways? Are you wanting it because you feel that lack of quality time between you and your spouse? Or do you want more time because you feel that lack of quality time between you and your children? Why do you want the time in the first place? Okay. You have to start there, I feel like.
I feel like you have watched the whole first season of my podcast.
Due diligence.
Of due diligence. Because in episode 1, I talked about 3 things that if we're going to live a diligent life that we had to think about. And these were general things. They were not necessarily applied specifically, but if we go back to that and we take those things and we apply them specifically, we naturally think about the what. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do? Why do we want to make time for this? Or I'm sorry, what do we want to make time for? And then we think about number 2, the why. And we focus on the why. And why do we want to make time for this? Is it because as a father, I need to spend more time with my kids? And it's not just about spending time, but it's just about spending quality time, meaningful time, purposeful time. And if I need to spend more time with you as my wife, then why is it that I want to spend that time? Is it selfish, or is it because I'm trying to be there for you and I'm trying to meet your needs for quality time as well? And I think that gets lost in translation a lot of times. I think a lot of times it's all about, why do I need this? Why do I want this? And we forget that in a family unit, it's got to be selfless and not selfish. And it's got to be not just about the things that I need, but it's got to be about the things that you need. It's got to be about the things that our children need. And so why do I want to do this? And by the way, is this something that I really should be wanting to do?
Right.
Is this something that I should be prioritizing? And I think when you get to the what do you want to do and the why, I think that should answer, okay, this is really selfish. I need to focus on my family. I need to focus on my wife. I need to pay attention to their needs. And this is why I should want to do this, not necessarily because I get something out of it, not because I get some sort of selfish agenda or not because I have some sort of selfish agenda, but because I'm trying to be selfless as a father, as a husband. And the same thing for the wife. We all have to ask ourselves those questions. I think that's important. And then the third thing was the how. And I think that's what we've got to move into. How are we going to accomplish this? We have to talk about, how are we going to reclaim our time in the home? You know, life goes by really fast. There are only 24 hours in a day, and 7 to 8 of those hours are spent in bed asleep. On average, 9 to 10 of those hours are spent working and providing. And if you have kids, they are in school. So that only leaves 6 to 8 hours of time per day for your spouse and for your kids. Think about this. If the Lord wills, you will get 18 years with your children before they move on to the next phase of their lives. That's 18 birthdays, 18 Halloweens, 18 Christmases, 18 summer vacations. Now let me ask you this. How many of those years have already gone by? You basically have 18 years to prepare your children for life before they move out of the house. And by the way, if we haven't said this, we want to say it again. It goes by so fast. And we say that, and we know that, but we still allow ourselves to be distracted by things that in the grand scheme of life are just not that important. And so what is important? Your home, your family, your spouse, your children, your faith, their faith. What's important? Time. If we are going to be diligent in the home, we have to get our time back from this time thief. We have to reclaim our time. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching, and make sure you join us next time for another episode of Due Diligence.
Don't forget to subscribe on all major platforms and visit our website at dudiligencepodcast.com.